So welcome back, everyone. So 7 for the ruling PNM and 7 for the UNC, with both parties claiming victory. The NTA, the PEP, PDP, MND and other smaller parties were not very successful in changing the minds of voters since this year's results look very similar to that of 2019. To give some perspective on the results, we are joined by a post-election panel. Live on set with us is Communications Minister Simon De Nobrega, and via Zoom, political commentator Ralph Maraj and attorney at law Martin George. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning.
Yeah, hi. Good morning to you and good morning Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Good morning.
Well, Minister, let's bring in you first. I know that you would have had a late night. We saw you at Balize House last night when the Prime Minister was speaking. The results are 7-7. From what we're hearing this morning and what we heard last night, there was some slippage by the PNM and also the UNC, but there were also some gains. What's your perspective this morning?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Yes, it was a long day. It was a long night. I think there's some photos of me celebrating with my team from Diego Martin Central in particular, where we retained all 3 districts that are assigned to Diego Martin Central. First big ticket item is that we have retained those seats that we were in charge of. We have made inroads into Princestown. I think we have 1 or 2 recounts that should be expected. And really now it is about moving on with the business of governance. It is moving on with the business of local government reform. I think that overall that there was the usual low turnout, and that at the end of the day comes down to people not thinking that local government delivers, that it works. We agree with them. We agree, the government agrees that it does not work. I, as a ex-councillor, ex-chairman of Diego Martin, then regional corporation, agree. And that is why we have said from day one, local government reform is critical and it is needed. Yeah. And that is what we are going to be about now.
Yeah, and let's bring in Ralph Maraj here, a former government minister. Mr. Maraj, how do you see yesterday's results? What's your analysis?
Well, it looks like the same on paper, but it is not quite the same when you look at the details, because some interesting details emerge. I see the UNC has won the majority vote, the majority of seats, made some penetration into some key areas like San Fernando and Sangre Grande. Interestingly, the NTA, which really took the fight to the PNM in their strongholds, the figures are not in, but from what I have been told and I've seen, the figures indicate that the NTA did make some penetration into that area, so that the whole scenario, all of the details, point to a very interesting 2025 general election, because for many of us, we were looking for what would happen here to sort of see what is going to take place in 2025. And the accommodation that came with the UNC and the NTA have now had, I would think, some success, some good signs. Significant success, especially with the NTA penetrating and the increases from the UNC, so that I would expect the momentum towards this coalition, this alliance, will continue. And I expect that the PNM would be very concerned about that, because previously when they had to encounter a massive alliance like in 1986 or 2010, the results didn't turn out very well for them at all.
Mr. George, is this what you expected?
Well, the thing is, it's actually reminiscent of the William Shakespeare play, which is Much Ado About Nothing, because really and truly, when one looks at it, I mean, despite the, minor gains that were made, by parties, the reality is that the populace on the whole appears, as the good minister mentioned, they appear not that interested in local government elections, and that speaks volumes, because when one looks at it, it seems clear that neither of these major parties is representative of a truly national party. Basically, what each side has done is dig their heels in their strongholds, make sure they shore up support and make maybe minor incursions into new territory. But really and truly, all they've done is consolidated their bases. And it makes you realize that we really do not have any one party which has that broad-based national support that you can say, well, look, this is representative of all of Trinidad and Tobago. You look at the map, geographically, that speaks volumes. But of course, the fact of the matter is that that you see more yellow than red doesn't speak to the demographics of it. Demographically, it may be that even though the red may be less on the map, they may have, more numbers overall. But the thing is, neither of them represents, something that you can really say is a national party representing the interests of all of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that's where we have really failed as a nation in terms of getting that overall representation.
Minister, is it a stagnant situation?
I don't think so. I think that if it is one issue that is truly representative of a national perspective, it is local government reform. And the PNM has said from day one, this is what we present to the country, this is what we are going to speak about on our campaign, and this is what we are going to move towards implementing.
But do you think that the electorate absorbed that message? Because from what we're seeing here, the Express is reporting, preliminary reports suggest the voter turnout remained at the traditional 30%.
Well, as I said, I think that in this case, it is that the electorate, one, in many ways is waiting to see. All right, we have a system of delivery at local government level that simply does not work. Yeah, and I think we can all agree on that. We have said that it needs to be changed. It will be changed, and this is how we are going to change it. And that is not a solution that is going to be rolled out in PNM controlled corporations. That is a national rollout based largely on a template set by the Tobago House of Assembly, which allows the corporations to be reactive and proactive, to make those decisions and implement those decisions, and backed by ability to fund those decisions. I think that is important. However, I think that the population, one, is there's a bit of a wait and see, which, I mean, after having seen local government not deliver for as long as it has, I can't be too upset with the population for that. And two, I also think that there was, while I think it was Ralph was saying, major inroads, I can tell you from what I saw in Diego Martin Central, in my Mount Coco, Alice Glen, Petite Valley, Cocorite, and Diamond Vale constituencies, while we did see certain polling divisions react, we didn't see that any huge inroad into an anti-government vote, a vote not for the government. So lessons will be learned. Of course, we will look at the results. We will look at the polling divisions that showed a lack of support. We will assimilate whatever lessons we can learn into our governance.
So you have to go back to the drawing table.
I don't think so. I think that we have a plan on the table. We have shared that plan with the nation, and we are setting about to implement that plan. Very importantly, however, we are not looking at this as a election-to-election approach. Unfortunately, that too often has been the case. I have to say from others. What we are about is implementing our local government reform, because we truly believe that is a paradigm shift.
Yeah, Mr. Maraj, how do we explain these paltry numbers? 30%. coming out to vote yesterday?
Well, I think that traditionally, as had been seen, there has been a low voter turnout for local government elections because people have not really felt the impact of local government on their lives. The country is too centralized, still too centralized. There has been some incremental decentralization towards local government, but enough has not been done. We welcome any attempt at local government reform, though we've had this talk for a very long time. I remember Dr. Rowley embarking in 2015, which is 8 years ago, with the then minister, the late Franklin Kahn, going all about talking about local government reform and hearing from the population and so on. But 8 years apart, and we haven't had anything. So I'm not saying that this is what is going to happen this time, but we wait and see. So the low voter turnout has been traditional, but we don't know exactly how much has come out. In some areas, you have much more than in other areas. We wait to see what are the exact figures. But to my mind, I would like to repeat what I just said. Whilst the parties remain divided, not anyone representing the entire nation as such, we live in a politically polarized society. We have seen the move in the past towards a national force, and that national force has captured the imagination. Now, it has not always worked. In fact, it has on the two occasions that in the recent past, the coalition has really disintegrated eventually. But that does not mean that we should not keep trying for this national force to represent all of the people. The method for developing and managing a coalition has to be improved, and I have no doubt that mistakes will be learnt from the past. But to me, the most important message coming so far from these preliminary figures is that there is the potential for a momentum. It happened in 1986. Previous to 1986, it started happening incrementally. And here I think is an incremental step towards the emergence of that national force. And I have no doubt that the thinkers and the planners and the People's National Movement will be looking at it because they have had an experience with this kind of force before. What must happen this time, this will be the third time in modern history, what must happen is for the planners of any coalition, any accommodation, any alliance to come to a very clear understanding how such an alliance would be managed after the election.
Mr. George, your perspective on the performance of the smaller political parties in the election?
Well, the reality is that we are a two-party nation by and large. And, the smaller parties, they add, fluff at the end of the day, but the substance is usually lacking. And, unless there is, as Ralph said, some groundswell of, emotion and movement that is able to capture the minds and hearts of, the population at large, they really just represent different, a variety of colors, different colors of T-shirts and jerseys. But it really does not have that impact that one would think that they would have otherwise. So when one looks at it, the reality is that we're now looking down the barrel of the general elections in 2 years. And interestingly enough, I would think that both parties need to think in terms of those two Tobago seats, because I think those will be the two most pivotal and critical seats in this election. Right now, they are held by the PNM, but given developments in Tobago, one has to wonder if it is that the PNM, given the current state of affairs, is able to hold on to them. What is their plan, their strategy for doing so? Because, Mr. Farley Augustine has gained some momentum, and he has come out as basically the Tobago strongman, and there's a certain penchant for that in certain sectors of the society where they seem to like the idea of him sticking it to Trinidad, or sticking it to central government, or sticking it to the Prime Minister and telling them as it is. I mean, of course, each person has their own style, but the reality is that I think those 2 Tobago seats are where people need to start focusing for the general elections.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. So, Minister, let's deal with some of the slippage for the ruling party in Sangre Grande and San Fernando. The Sangre Grande Corporation has moved from 5-3 in the UNC's favor to 6-2 in the UNC's favor, with the PNM losing the Valencia West seat to the UNC candidate, Neil De Silva, a former Olympian. In the San Fernando Corporation, while the party control remains with the PNM, the seat distribution moved from 6-3 in the PNM's favor to 5-4 in the PNM's favor. Is this slippage cause for concern at all?
I don't know that cause for concern is the way that we look at it. I think that, again, you will look at the results. You will see, okay, where have we not delivered and how can we deliver better? It's interesting that both Ralph and Martin would have touched on it. There is a lot of focus on how do we win an election. And that's what a lot of this conversation has ended up being about. And I want to tell you that while that may be the focus, maybe the reason that these coalitions have not won any past is because there's not enough focus on how do we govern and deliver to the citizenry. So after the election is won, coalition or not, what is next? So while we want to talk about where the results are, while we want to talk about what has happened in the past with a coalition or what could happen in 2025 with the 2 Tobago seats, this PNM government is focused on delivery and is focused on governance. It is important that we also state that there is a devolution of power, there is a decentralization of power, and its name is local government reform. It may, your viewers and my fellow panelists may feel I'm just ringing the same bell, but this is what local government reform really is about. It is about ensuring that regardless of what corporation you reside in or vote in or work in, the citizens of that corporation, the small businesses of that corporation, the issues of security in that corporation are all addressed at the local government level by the corporation, whether that be regional, borough, or city, in order to bring delivery and to impact the citizen's life on a daily basis at their level, out front, their door, in their community, in their businesses. So we are looking at the results from a holistic point of view. Of course, there will undoubtedly be lessons learned as we look at the results themselves and we drill down into what polling divisions did not perform well, what numbers came back. There are going to be some recounts, so even those numbers may shift a little bit. But that is for the people who are concerned with that to be concerned about. Today is the 15th. The PNM government is focused on governance as it was on the 14th and on the 13th and on the 16th.
All right. This is the morning after. We are discussing the 7-7 tie in the local government election. Minister of Communication Simon de Norbriga, he's on set. We also have political commentator Ralph Maraj and also attorney at law Martin George. Gentlemen, we must go to a very short break. We'll be right back. All right, so welcome back. Minister of Communications, Simon de Norbriga, he's with us in studio. We also have Ralph Maraj on the line and also Martin George. Mr. Maraj, there was the perception that this would have been a referendum on the PNM, the UNC, and also on the leadership of both parties. What's your perspective on that?
Well, as far as the leadership of the UNC is concerned, I think I saw Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar with some justification, being very buoyant, in receiving the results, because I think she has strengthened her position as the leader of the UNC with this performance of the party. The fact is, the party has won more seats than its main opponent, the PNM. It has won more votes nationally than the PNM, and it has made some significant inroads into some critical areas. I mean, that San Fernando West, for example, is a marginal seat, a bellwether seat, if you want to look at it, in the general elections, and people are looking at that. And I think they won one, and I think they came pretty close to winning another and actually winning the corporation. In Sangre Grande, the same thing. So that I think she has consolidated her position, and the fact that she has opened the party to an alliance with the NTA. I see the labor union, the OWTU, appeared significantly with them in San Fernando, and in fact, in particular in the Marabella area and so on, where they won this particular seat and where they came close to winning another. So, and of course, the return of Jack Warner. So that in the minds of the UNC membership, there is significant excitement about what is going to happen going forward. There is no doubt in my mind. I mean, they would say otherwise, but the planners, the strategists, the people who dig down into the details in the PNM will be concerned. They will look very carefully, because they know that if this trend continues, if, for example, this accommodation grows into this mighty alliance, to possibly have some kind of relationship with Tobago, with a stronger relationship with the unions, the trade unions, a stronger relationship with NGOs, and so on. You can have a really mighty force emerging, which we saw in 1986, as I said, and in 2010. So that I think the leadership in the PNM, whilst not too worried, they will have to be looking at the situation closely, because they have suffered some significant losses. Though they did win in a seat in Princestown, which they had never won before. But Princestown is not a bellwether constituency. It is not a marginal constituency. Traditionally, it has gone to the UNC.
Yep.
So that, they will be concerned, they will be thinking, they will be looking to how to prevent it, because they know there is growth. And as I said, as far as Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar is concerned, I think she has consolidated her position, and she should be pretty comfortable going forward into 2025.
Mr. George, has anyone really won here? Has the PNM won, the UNC won, the people won? Has local government won? Who has won this?
Well, the thing is, I would think that given the fact that the PNM is in charge of central government, and given the fact that they may have lost one or two seats, it may not be so much a question of who has won, but who has lost ground, so to speak. And it would appear that the PNM has some thinking to do in terms of going back to the drawing board. In fact, if one were to look at the reaction of the Prime Minister.
All right. We're having some difficulty there with Mr. George's connection. Do we have him back as yet? No? All right. Let's move on to Mr. Norbriga. Mr. Norbriga, do you think that the message of local government really resonated with people? my personal view is, if it really...
I think, internally, those who do the tracking of the numbers and the statistics will be, asking themselves some questions and be looking forward as to how they're going to improve things for the general election. Because the way we function in Trinidad and Tobago is that these political parties, they are all focused on elections and winning elections. And I mean, while I appreciate the altruistic stance that the minister is taking, the reality is that the party faithful are interested in winning elections. And that's what they want to see, and that's what 2025 is going to be about. And I think that really and truly, there would be some need for some, introspection and for some reflection by the PNM in terms of the way this result has panned out and the overall response that you got from the Prime Minister, where he said it could have been worse.
Yeah. Mr. Minister, so many things happened during this election here, over this period of time here. But do you think that the electorate really bought into this concept of local government reform? You think that they understood it? They were educated enough about it to go out and say, look, we are going to vote for local government reform?
It's interesting that I think that question was posed to the Prime Minister last night.
Yes.
And he, in his response, if I remember correctly, said that if they did not, it was not for lack of trying on our part. In the lead up to the elections, we had made significant attempts to inform our local government bodies as to what local government reform was going to be able to deliver to them, and to try to upskill them, on how to rule out local government. It's interesting that there was a directive from the opposition that those corporations where they had control were not to attend. During the campaign, we made a conscious decision as a party, the Prime Minister as our political leader, to get away from, as we say, the rab of the political hustings, and to approach it from a conversations perspective, to have people ask those questions that they had on what local government would mean for them, and to approach it that way by explaining to them how can this work for you, how will this work for you, and what is your role in it. I think that there was a definite position taken by those opposed to the PNM to be opposed to local government reform in all facets as far as the political campaign was concerned. And I think in that sense, what you saw was a lack of information being shared with people, especially in those non-PNM controlled corporations and amongst that base. But even from our conversation today, I think it's evident that when you look at reform, everyone can see that this is what we need. I thank Martin for telling me that I have an altruistic approach. I've lived it. I've lived local government as a practitioner, and as a result of that, I know the major shortcomings. I have seen what has been presented. I have listened to what has been presented, what has been debated, what the package will be, what the law looks like, and I see the impact that this will have. I know that, again, we want to talk about one election has passed and the other election is to come, and what the party faithful want to see. When an election is called, an election has to be won. The PNM has always done that and have always done it on its own, win or lose. We approach an election based on winning that election, wherever that election is called, and yes, that is to be the approach when an election is called. But other than that, we have to be concerned with governance.
Yes. Mr. Maraj, let's talk a little bit about the UNC strategy. Was it successful? Because the UNC, they used personalities such as Mr. Warner, Jack Warner. They used personalities such as Gary Griffith. There was some feeling that there would have been a major shakeup on the East-West corridor. The UNC also adopted the strategy of speaking about crime and the perception of how bad crime is in Trinidad and Tobago. So did the UNC strategy work?
Well, I think it did. If you look at the results, as I say, 7-7 on paper looks like the same, but it is really not the same when you look down into the details. And I've said it at least twice so far. When you look at the details, the UNC strategy won. Clearly, they have decided to go into an accommodation. And whilst Mr. Gary Griffith, you mentioned him as a personality, I think he also had a sound reputation as a former commissioner of police. When people felt safe and people had the confidence in the police service rose to unprecedented heights. But
don't you think that should have translated a little more or resonated a little more to the electorate?
Well, I think that when things like this happen, what is happening is that the people are seeing a new phenomenon. They are seeing Gary as a politician. They are seeing the emergence of an alliance. They want some more time to look at it. And these things always happen incrementally. It happened incrementally in 86. 86 didn't happen in 86 alone. It started in 81, right? And 2010 started way back in 2007 and so on. So these things happen incrementally. People have to get attuned. They have to get accustomed. They have to digest. They have to internalize. And I think that is what really happened in this election. And the results, the very positive evidence, in my view, for the accommodation alliance going forward is very, very positive. Jack Warner, you mentioned Jack Warner. I mean, he has issues with the extradition that is, hanging towards the United States. We don't know what is going to happen. He has said that it is a sure as night follows day, he is going to be exonerated. But the fact is that he has had a phenomenal career as a politician. As I said before once, he has been a kind of force of nature in the politics, and he's a very charismatic person. He's a folk hero. There is no doubt that he's very well liked across the board by members by people in the country. So that these are two figures. These are two figures that have been part of the alliance, and I think the reception that they received was very, very positive. I expect going forward that we will see more of emerging alliance, and the ground has been laid for that.
Yes.
So that is really, for me, the most interesting thing coming out of this election. Because, Marlon, we live in a plural society. This is a diverse country. And at the end of the day, we want a system of governance where every sector of the population, all races, all classes, all religion, people of different
Mr. Maraj, I will allow you to continue, and also Mr. George is up next. But Minister, I know that you have to leave us. Any final thoughts?
I just want to echo the Prime Minister's comments. Before I do that, Ralph has brought up some points here. We've talked about coalitions. Even yesterday, I believe on last night, passing glimpse at a panel that was on another station. I will not call it on yours. But even there, representatives from the NTA who were speaking had already started to speak about fundamental differences of opinions with regards to positions taken on the very same platform that they were on. Again, maybe the electorate should be reminded, citizens should be reminded as to how all of these coalitions eventually went, because they were simply constructed to win an election, whereas the PNM is focused on governance when in governance and responsible opposition when in responsible opposition. I echo the Prime Minister's sentiments last night when he was asked, local government reform is before us, we are moving ahead, and we invite all the citizens, regardless of where you are, what corporation you are in, to come and let us build a nation together.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for coming this morning. Yeah, Mr. George, if we can, how do we get away, Mr. George, from situations such as these? Of course, you have a long campaigning period, and then at the end of the day, you're getting all of these ties. Isn't that having an impact on the electorate?
Well, I think it shows that in some way the electorate is jaded, the electorate is disinterested, the electorate is disconnected, because some people feel, well, look, it's, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So they feel that there's very little point in participating in the democracy that way, because when they look at their personal lives, they see no difference regardless of who's in power. So I think that's where the parties need to make that difference. And that's why I made the point at the start, to say that, look, neither party appears to really have that national representation when you look at the map, as I say, either geographically or demographically. So therefore, that's where you need to start changing the narrative. In other words, you can't continue as the UNC only campaigning in your strongholds where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, preaching the same narrative to your base who are already the converted. So basically, you're preaching to the choir. You need to, get the gumption and that strength of conviction to say, hey, listen, okay, let us show the nation that we are truly a national party. Let's go out into our non-traditional areas and really try to make some inroads. The thing is, what we have seen in the past is that the UNC tries to, form these amalgamations, and then what they do is they send out the smaller parties into these, basically like the PNM strongholds, and they say, well, okay, we wouldn't contest those with you, you go ahead, but the point is basically you're putting them as sacrificial lambs while you remain safe and secure in your stronghold, and you are deepening your base, but you are not expanding it. And in a large way, the PNM, in similar manner, they are digging their heels in without really going out there and making that concerted effort. Okay, of course, they picked up a seat in Princestown. But the point is, where do we see that presence where you can see a sustained effort by the PNM as a party to win hearts and minds in Couva South, in Couva North, in Siparia, to show that, look, hey, we can represent you. We can be there for you as a national party. Instead, each one sits in the comfort zone of their strongholds, and they lap up the adulation and the praise of their supporters, and they get a high off of it, and they feel so good about it that they just neglect the other areas. And as a result, you have exactly what you're saying, these 7-7 ties, and you basically may have a repeat of the general election result if it is that, there's no change in the Tobago seats. As I say, those may be really the pivotal seats come 2025. But we need to see leaders who are willing to go out there and be bold enough to say, hey, listen, even in my non-traditional areas, I will show that I am leader for all the people. Yes. You may get some flack, you may get some stick, you may get some, criticism initially, but once people recognize that you are there in a genuine manner, they will begin to accept and embrace your policies. It doesn't necessarily mean they may immediately switch and vote for you, but at least they will begin to understand that there's some level of sincerity to your effort, rather than just a glib and slick, plastering on our face, on our poster, come election time to say, well, yes, this is your representative for the area, and nobody knows the person because no work has been done, no groundwork has been done, no, work down in the trenches. Yes. And that's what we need to see from our leaders if they are serious about saying that you are representing the entire nation.
Yeah. Mr. George and Mr. Maraj, if you could please hold your thoughts for a little while longer. We must go to a very short break. We're coming back.
Hey.
And that's a live video as to what is happening in the Caroni area. To the left, you have traffic heading into Central and I suspect eventually South. And to the, what do I say? To the left-hand side, now that's traffic heading into, heading north. Yeah? All right, so we are continuing our discussion on the 7-7 tie in the local government election. We are continuing our discussion with political commentator Ralph Maraj and attorney at law Martin George. Mr. Maraj, we just have about 2 minutes again. Mr. Maraj, what's the next step?
Well, let me first of all say that democracy has triumphed, and we talk about who won and so on, but I think democracy has triumphed. There's nothing more critical in the life of any nation than the individual human rights and freedoms of the people. I therefore hope that all of the questions that have been raised by the opposition over the conduct of the elections and they've asked the EBC questions and so on, I really hope that they answer these things faithfully and correctly and accurately. And I want to suggest to the EBC that it understands its role in preserving the sanctity of this nation so that, avoid being, subject to any undue influences and pressures. I look forward, Marlon and Martin, to the future. I'm really very excited by what I saw. There's a stimulation taking place. I wrote an article called "It's Happening," and this what I saw in this election continues to confirm that something is happening in the bowels of the population. The results, and that is going to emerge. It is going to emerge. 1 year ago, I said that this massive alliance is going to eventually manifest itself as it did in 86 and 2010. And I see this happening, and I think it's a very exciting period and exciting 2 years coming up. And I look forward to it. And I really hope that, things, the vibration and the vibrancy and the enthusiasm, that I see, that I saw happening in certain areas and among certain, electors, and among certain politicians and so on. I hope that continues because that is very good for the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Maraj, as always, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning, and thank you very much for the education that you always give us. So I'd allow you to go, but we will continue with Mr. George for a few minutes more. Mr. George, your final thoughts?
Well, I just hope that Ralph misspoke when he said that something is happening in the bowels of the population and it will soon emerge, because I'm not sure I want to see what is going to emerge there. I imagine he's probably referring to the hearts and minds of the population. And that's where I would want to place my appeal, that, as Trinbagonians, we start thinking in terms of what is best for our nation. We have to start thinking in terms of how do we make our nation better by holding our politicians more accountable, by ensuring that they understand their roles and responsibilities and that they deliver for the nation. As I keep saying, I really admire Minister De Nobrega's enthusiasm for, the whole of government approach. And I hope that that really is something we will see coming forth. But you can understand the, cynicism of the population, because over the years we have heard the same type of song being sung by the politicians when they are on the campaign trail, but then once they get into office, it becomes the night of the long knives, and, it's each man for himself, and, it's to hell with the population at that stage. And we really have to change that narrative. And let me tell you, Marlon, I am always optimistic for the future of Trinidad and Tobago, because we are blessed with so many talented people. Our population is so diverse, so talented, so skilled, that I think once we harness and tap into that, we can create some synergies that can make this the best little nation on the face of the earth. And in that regard, I will always say, may God continue to bless our nation.
Yeah. Mr. George, as always, thank you very much for speaking with us. It is always an education, and I'm also going to take that phrase from you, the Knights of the Long Knives. So, again, thank you very much, sir. Bye for now.
Always a pleasure.
All right, bye for now. So it's time for another break. We're coming back with another panel for you.